So it is with great joy that I find myself talking to you, Richard. For those of you that know Richard, you'll be aware of his amazing work. For those of you who don't, I'm really excited to bring you into your awareness. He's the author and creator of Gene Keys, which is a massive, massive body of work, a really intelligent, insightful model to help people look at where they're at in their life and what maybe is being called for from within. And you could probably describe it better or differently, but for me, it's an incredible map, but it's a foundation of the deepest understanding of how we're human and what we need to be aware of, and what we can do to live more beautifully, which is therefore no surprise for me, Richard, that when I spoke to people, a number of people, about who should I talk to about masculinity or divine masculinity, your name came up a number of times. And so I'm really, really pleased to be here with you. So welcome.
Thank you. Lovely to be here. And good to meet you, Tom.
Thank you. And so I guess for me, my journey, I've spent the last 22 years, probably 70% of my clients were women. And my focus has been hugely on inner child healing and helping people heal trauma. And I got a very strong kind of intuitive instruction, really. Sometimes the universe whispers, cosmic whispers, and sometimes it kind of, it's louder. And for me, it was very loud at the end of the last year, because my partner has been really developing her femininity, her divine femininity. And what I found inside myself were these archaic patriarchal structures that were struggling with holding space for that. And it's left me questioning, like, what is divine masculinity in a modern way today? And that's that. So I'm now on a journey to explore that and to help men answer those questions for themselves. And so I'd really love to just, hear your thoughts on what that looks like and what you may have done to align with that in your life more.
Yeah, it's a great question, Tom. Thank you. Well, I'll begin by saying I'm a father, and that has been a huge journey for me in my life. I've been and still am, a very hands-on dad, a father. And so I delivered 2 of my 3 children, and just happened to be there. And I never looked back from there. I was, half of it is being done by me. And obviously the nurturing of the mother in the early years is, mostly done by the mother. But then, in a supportive role, and then more active as the children grow. So, and my kids are, even though they're now in their teenagers and 20, they're all still at home, and I'm still their father, and I'm still learning from them and supporting them. And that's been, probably one of the deepest inspirations for my spiritual work. And especially in the early days, when it's really hard as a parent in the modern world without the support structures of the old tribal ways, the nuclear family, it's exhausting. And so actually a lot of my work came out of a spiritual and kind of emotional need to support myself. And luckily out of that came like a whole system and a kind of system of wisdom, if you like, for supporting others as well. But yeah, it is about, a lot of the impulse of my work is about this prophetic time that we're living in, where there is this rising up of the feminine, and it's well talked about, as you said, the divine feminine. And I'm not sure everyone understands fully what that means, divine feminine, and everyone probably has a different way of understanding it. For me, it's not so much about kind of women flowing about in beautiful robes and kind of
Definitely
doing
not.
tantra workshops. It's more, for me, that divine feminine is deeply practical, and it's like, the world needs help. It needs support. It needs to be woken up. We need to change the structures and the systems and all of that. And the feminine, that's where that's what the mother is. The mother is eminently practical. So I'm starting by talking about the feminine, so we understand what that is. It is incredibly practical. There's nothing like a mother for practicality. Especially the mother with the young child, she doesn't have a lot of time for anything else, or energy for anything else. It's like food, support, safety, shelter. Those are the essentials. And then it's like my sanity as well, rest, relationship, family, community, all of that those are the kind of essential things. The land, the earth itself around us. And so, that's for me, what I've loved witnessing more and more is the rise of the feminine into the masculine structures that have been created, and innovating in there and kind of holding higher stations. I mean, just in the last week, I think, for the first, female judge in Pakistan, which is an extraordinary kind of moment in the history of, those cultures, the Islamic cultures, to have a woman become a judge. And so it's a sign of the times in a way that's rising up. And so you're right, that leaves, like, there's a lot of impetus in that direction. Where does it leave men? Where does it leave the masculine? Because what we hear, and rightly so, is the patriarchy needs to be disassembled. The old ways need to be kind of pulled apart and re-imprinted in something that works better. Something that creates more justice, that takes care of the world and the earth. And I often think that, one of the things that I think it's one of the chapters in my Gene Keys book. It's entitled "Through the Eyes of a Child," and it's about, if we can create a world through the eyes of an incarnating child, looking through the eyes of an incarnating child, just as that child comes in, we will have, and what they need, and that's the baseline, not like how we can meet our kind of all our adult needs, but what the children really need to grow into healthy, rounded, whole adults, wholesome. If we can create a world out of looking through those eyes, then we've created a world, for, a really healthy, harmonic world. And that is how the mother sees, the feminine, whether she's a mother or not. That's how the feminine naturally sees, the feminine side of the brain even sees in like that. So it's not even just about women and men. I'm sure you know that. It's about the right and left sides of the brain. It's about what Jung called the animus and the anima alive inside us. So I've kind of started by, like, let's clarify what we mean by the divine feminine. Yeah, and then we can kind of look and see, well, what's left.
Yeah, totally. Because that creates the shape of the vacuum that I'm kind of feeling, right? And it's understanding. Yeah. I think, for me, part of the problem, I think that a lot of the archetypes that have been peddled, even specifically by the personal development, spiritual development world, have been smeared with existing patriarchal ideologies, and even within the movement, there's a whole new uprising of, I don't know if you know, the polarity movement, which I find a very disconcerting backward step, where it's like the divine feminine is the maiden. And she never challenges, and she just dances around, and she's incredibly alluring and very beautiful, never questions a man. And she's just looking to be served by this God King, daddy, and it's just like, that is not divine femininity. Are you kidding me? Like the wild woman, the crone, these are deeply, deeply powerful beings that they're grounded in the wisdom of the land. And the elder crone, with one look to the wild warrior, could soothe his crazy appetite for war and erosion with one glance. And it's like, we're like, oh my God, we need that. It's like, I also struggle a little bit with this idea within some of those models, it's like, I need a king to find my queen, and I need a queen to find my king. And it's like, we have to understand those movements inside ourselves and how they balance. But it's like, if your crown can fall because your woman challenges you, then it wasn't your crown, you know. And it's like,
yeah,
it's like, what is the shape
I mean,
of that?
you kind of remind me of, because I think it was this year that Robert Bly died. And you know, he has been the great champion in the West anyway, of like the, you know, what the divine masculine means, you know, particularly through that wonderful book that if any man's listening to this and hasn't read Iron John, you have to read it. There is no, you know, it is the only book you should read, you know, first anyway, because it just addresses everything. It's so beautiful how he phrases that. So he's kind of paved the way for these kind of conversations, like what does it mean to overcome, you know, the woundings of the male, you know, in this climate where the female is like, the feminine is taking off, you know, is being super empowered. And that's not to say, you know, that everywhere, because it's still like a long journey ahead. But I think one of the roles of the divine masculine is to support that, you know, is to make sure that we are supporting the feminine in its rise. And yet, like just this morning, I was listening to something on, you know, a podcast on a social media app called Clubhouse that I use. And you know Clubhouse, and my community, a lot of my community communicates through that app because it's audio and we meet each other and talk and chat, and everyone's welcome. Anyone can drop in.
Oh, nice. When do you run those?
Well, I do there's several in the Gene Keys Club. There's a club on there, and it's very easy, you know. But I do Fridays at 6:00 GMT. I do something called the City Club, which is like a transcendent discussions, and we have guests, and it's an amazing group. Yeah, you have like a couple of hundred people for that hour or so, and there are other great things. But anyways, where was I saying? Where was I? About the divine,
the rise of the feminine.
Exactly. And there was I heard a guy this morning, and he was championing the rise of the feminine, and he was saying, I don't know why I can't get celebrity women to come on my podcast. He's obviously a big podcaster, you know, he has huge following, and he gets lots of male billionaires and stuff, and he likes to have big people, really successful people. But he was bemoaning the fact that very few well-known women come on his podcast, and he was saying, you know, trying to come up with ideas for why that was. For me, listening, I just kind of thought, well, it's because you're a man. And you're still playing out the old role at some unconscious level of, I'm going to rescue the feminine, you know, and I think partly the reason why the women weren't coming is because they needed that podcast to be hosted by a woman and a group of women, you know, and have men there for sure. But there was this, you know, there's that, we're not here to sort of, it's a fine line between support and rescue.
Yeah, we're going to lead the rise of the divine feminine as men, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I will. Yeah, I totally agree. So, I had a conversation.
So I'd say that's.
Sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, that's a key thing, is we support it, you know, but we don't, as you said, we don't kind of lead it. You know, we are not the champions. You know, we have to be in the background for a change. You know, so that I think is one of the first jobs of us. But then obviously, what you said is, you know, we are lacking now the father. You know, because if the father's been thrown out of the patriarchy, you know, you just end up with a matriarchy, and we don't want that either. You know,
with the pendulum, right? We want to head for the center point now, right? Let's say,
what I call it, in Gene Keys, I call it a synarchy. Synarchy. It's a lovely word, and it means, you know, the synthesis of, so and everything comes together in balance, but it's a natural balance where male and female are serving each other equally, and initiating each other as well. And obviously within that, when I say male and female, I mean all the kind of variations of male and female, because there are so many now.
Yes.
So there's an incredible rich diversity of relationships, and all of that gender fluidity and stuff, which is another whole wormhole. But I think part of that divine masculine is about reclaiming the father inside us, the healthy father, and that means we have to heal our own father relationships and wounds. My father died a year ago, and it was a beautiful. I had a beautiful relationship with him towards the end. In the end, and early in my life, my childhood wasn't so great. He was a distant father, and then he softened as he retired, and then I got to know him a bit, and I had to find ways to get to relate with him. Because fathers can be very distant, and they can seem cruel and Saturnian and all those things. And the father-son relationship is extraordinary, and so we have to rebuild it in some way. And that's been my journey. I rebuilt it, but I had to rebuild it from my side. There was no way he was going to rebuild it. No, it was my job. So have you had similar?
Yeah, in all the work I do, so my specialism is inner child work, and so it's healing. And so the first wave with people is to first pop their denial, right? So that they can really get that they were deeply let down, and even people who know they were let down, there's still huge amounts of their younger selves that are still walking backwards in a circle, rather blaming themselves for what didn't work than really feel the worst pain, which is a 3-year-old's disappointment in a parent, which is too dangerous, too toxic to hold then. And so the first wave of the work is really getting them to get that they were deeply let down. But then as I move them through the layers, I get them to realize that it is the unresolved conflict about that is now perpetuating the dysfunctional and distant relationship. So it's this movement from you were totally let down and it wasn't your fault, to now as an adult, you can heal this, and what happened isn't relevant because it's your feelings about what happened, which is making this dynamic of the Cold War. I call it going around asking for would you like a cup of tea, and unconsciously flicking the V's and wondering why they aren't interested in our work and are judgmental about our choices, because we have this unresolved Cold War because we have an unresolved inner child. So I totally agree, and I get them to realize that if you can completely get to a place where you see everything that happened to you as being an intrinsic part of your beauty and your greatness, not dismissing the challenges, but integrating it, then the energy you hold will transform that relationship, and they don't need to do any personal development. It's stay on your side of the street and you can completely change the dance. And so I totally agree. And then through that, there are conversations that can occur where we're no longer saying, I need you to be different for me to love you as my father. Then it's like, I love you as my father, and because I love you, I may reflect certain things that you might want to contemplate for your own freedom. Whereas, so it goes from criticizing to serving, and it becomes a relationship of love, and that creates space for vast change.
And even if your father has died, you get to rebuild that in every relationship, whether it's male or female. You get to rebuild. The masculine is all about boundaries and clear boundaries. And one of the things, I've learned, I had a wonderful mentor. I was so fortunate, and I wish it upon all people, just generally, not just men, but that if you're open to your own healing, then fantastic mentors come. And I had a wonderful father mentor that came in, a male mentor, who was a grandfather actually, and named Don Rosenthal. He's still alive, he's still around in California doing relationship sessions. That's what he does. He's in his 80s now, and he spent 50 years working with his wife, his partner, beautiful woman, together in a cabin in the woods in rural Vermont. They're now in California. It's a bit warmer there. and their collective wisdom about relationships is extraordinary. And I kind of, in a relationship crisis with my own wife, went to him with her, and went through a kind of initiation and ended up becoming a really great friend of Don and Martha, and he's written a couple of books as well, Don Rosenthal. You can look them up. But one of the things he taught me was to understand some essentials that I'd never been taught. And there I was in my 40s or something, and there was just basics, huge blind spots in my relating field. Like, I didn't realize there was such a thing as an emotional affair. No one told me there was an emotional affair. I had great relationships with women, and then I had my relationship with my wife, and then there was this lack of boundaries I had to learn, because there was this sense of, well, as long as I don't sleep with them, that's okay, isn't it? And so, but no, it isn't. No. Because you actually, for men, we have to really understand these lines. So I learned from Don how to respect my woman, and how to respect myself and my relationship, and that was a really key moment for me, because I needed someone to reflect it to me and just ask me these deep probing questions. And then I was like, oh my God, you're right. And he would just keep asking me these questions of, well, how do you think she feels about that? Yeah. And I'd say, well, she's not happy. And he'd say, and do you think she's justified? He'd got this wonderful deep voice. And I go, well, actually, now you put it like that, yes, I do. And he said, and so he would just lead you on this journey deep into your kind of Buddha nature. And then you'd realize, oh my God, did I never learn this? And so there are some basic things that men have to learn, and commitment, our fear of commitment is another huge one. Men have a huge fear of commitment in relationships, and that also has to be kind of addressed. And that's another whole subject, another wormhole.
For me, the relationship between mortality and commitment is the piece, right? Because it's like, I'm signing up, I'm in, but it ends. And I'm not, so our resistance to life and death completely puts cracks in our willingness to turn up and commit. But you're right. It's the male warrior spirit. We're good at applying it externally. We're not so good at applying it internally. So the warrior spirit is part of our love, to hang on in there. To really stay with the process, to stay with the person, and so my teachings, I really encourage people to stay in relationships as long as they can, as long as they're not totally abusive. I would say stick with it, and build something. And if you have a solid friendship, you can really build something powerful, and it will just grow and grow and grow, and it will go through so many phases. And there'll be phases where you're apart emotionally, and there'll be phases when you're together, and there'll be but that is the relationships as a spiritual path is a kind of uncharted world, and that's where we learn the divine masculine, because the woman, it's inherent to her to be a woman. And so she's just being a woman, angry, loving, sexy, as you said, the crone, all these archetypes just coming across. And for a woman, it's just pure intuitive, and so the man has to kind of cope with all those moods and all of those things. And I'm only talking from my view, man and woman, because that's me. That's me, but it's different perspective. But exactly. And there are many layers to it. But you learn in any relationship that's intimate, if you stay in it. I've been in mine over 20 years now. You really, that's the warrior. Like, if you can stay in one of these things, like, it puts you through the most extraordinary spiritual evolution. So that's another aspect of, for me, the divine masculine, is that commitment to one path. And it doesn't have to be relationships. Maybe yours is the monk. I've been doing some recent things with this monk on Clubhouse,
Rishi Chidananda, beautiful man,
Mm.
Indian man, who and we're like, I'm the monk, he's the monk and I'm the householder, and we have this conversation that just of spirituality, how they cross over each other. And if you're a monk, great, be a monk. If you're not, try and find one of these things, these relationships, and stay in it. Have the courage to stay in it. Meet that feminine, because the feminine can be ferocious, right? And it could be that that you're in a gay relationship or whatever. It's like, it's still the feminine that's ferocious you're meeting. And and the masculine can be deeply tender. It's within the extremes. It's like the yin yang symbol. You find the kind of the other side. So the woman can be just a fearsome warrior, and the male can be deeply, deeply tender. And because the mother is in the father and the father is in the mother. You can't separate these forces. So I think there's something very valuable to learn in any relationship, whatever it is.
I think also changing that narrative, that I think everyone should understand that the purpose of relationship is growth, right? Yes, some domestic convenience and certainty, of course, partnership and managing the vicissitudes of life and complexities of life to pair up and make things easier. But on a personal development, spiritual development, right, it's to completely make you question who you are and what you stand for, and to pull you apart over and over and over again.
Yeah. I mean, I as like in our world, there are many of the, if I do a workshop or a course or a retreat or something, it's always 70% women. That's changing, because and they're all saying, where are the men? Where are the real men? And when the woman says, where's a real man? They're not saying, where's a hunky kind of, they're saying the opposite. They're saying, where's a balanced man? Mm. And I kind of like, I welcome this conversation, because I've been through the kind of mill of, failing in my relationship, picked myself up, I had an affair, I did all those things that, and then I healed, my wife decided to stay with me, thank God. And then we started the journey of healing and forgiveness, and we've built stronger and stronger and stronger. And we're not the kind of, we're not this flowy tantric couple. We are eons apart. She's not interested in Gene Keys and the things I do. She's just an earth woman.
Yeah.
And so you might think, how can you have this life and not, do the like, relationships are paradoxes, riddles, but they're not riddles to be solved. They're just to be lived. So I would say to anyone that's looking for the perfect relationship, there isn't one. There's no, in Gene Keys, we look at all the chemistry. Gene Keys is it's a system of looking at algorithms between people and in oneself. So you have an algorithm for your prosperity, an algorithm for love, an algorithm for your higher purpose, and there are also algorithms between couples and people, and which is something I'm going to be developing more, but not for the purpose of bringing people together to find your perfect couple. More like to show you, it's more to show you that every chemistry, of all the chemistries between people, because there are algorithms for chemistry, according to my work with the Gene Keys.
But it has an evolutionary purpose.
Well, they all have an evolutionary purpose. And when you look at them, and I start to categorize them, so there are romantic algorithms, and then there are friendship algorithms, and then there are ones that are kind of adventurous, I call them, because two people come together and you sort of wonder why they've come together, because the algorithms don't match at all. And you're thinking, oh my goodness, those two are like, how on earth are they going to get on? And it's an adventure. So you have to kind of look at that as an adventure, and it may not last, or it could last, but there's no, and the one that we sort of covet the most is the romantic. And there are fewer of those algorithms statistically. Actually, it's really interesting. If you ever want to explore the Gene Keys, you learn these things. You learn how, all the mechanics of relating and stuff. But the one that we really yearn for is actually to actually make it last is very difficult. It's very challenging. You almost have to live apart if you have one of those, because you need to keep the distance of the romance alive. If you kind of get married and do the whole thing, you've got to somehow keep the distance, because it's based on longing. So one of you has an energy that's and the other one completes it in another octave. And if you kind of, take two magnets and pull them together, suddenly the charge is gone. So you got to keep the charge. Anyway, so I'm just giving examples of
no, but it's fascinating, because it's there is tech, there's wisdom. It's like, this is the stuff that needs to be defined and articulated. So it's amazing.
It's just an example is that there's no perfect chemistry. So the one that's in front of you is the one, right? Is the one to really listen to.
Yes, perfect defined by the possibilities of growth, as opposed to endless domestic bliss, right? And so it depends how you define it, right? But
so that's a part of masculine.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, where else should we go?
Well, it's exactly what I was just about to say. I have 4 children, 2 from previous relationship, and 2 that I live with full time. And for me, just the fact that so I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so it's incredibly intense right now, and especially during lockdown, where certainly no tribal support was really available. And I try and explain to some people, sometimes it's like waking up usually is something that you wake up, and if you even need to get up very quickly, you will have maybe 5 or 10, maybe 30 seconds, maybe a couple of minutes just to orient yourself, wake up nicely, get out of bed. But when you have a young child who's stirring, and if you can get to them within 5 seconds, you can settle them, and then they won't be awake for an hour. You have these awful moments of totally deeply painful, sacrificial agonies of waking up and having to be standing within 2 seconds, because it's more important to get to them than how you might like to wake up. And on an average day in a parent's life, there are 30 or 40 of those moments where you can't get to your cup of tea that you've just made because you're dealing with something over here. And actually, what I discovered in that was that I wasn't the most important person in my life, and it was actually deeply refreshing to discover that I wasn't as selfish as I thought I was, actually, that I had a capacity to be deeply available at great cost to myself. Not always, sometimes deeply negligent, not present, distracted, and all those other things, but it is ennobling. I think whenever I kind of like really contemplate on the principle of what's beautiful about the masculine, it is that protective, unconditionally loving, available. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but I recommend them. There are videos on YouTube of fathers doing these kind of heroic saves of kids. So they're on a swing and then they end up flying off, and they manage to catch them by their toe, or they chase on. I find them incredibly heartwarming, because it's like moments of genius and brilliance in the service of protecting a child. It's like, it's got everything in it. And some of them are nothing short of miraculous. But that to me is the breadcrumb I'm following. But not needing to have a child to access the archetype of fathership in being a business owner, in being a community member, in just it's like, how do we bring that fathership or even grandfathership to our 20-year-olds and help them start cultivating that? What does that mean? Because even with my kids, if I find myself getting conditional and frustrated, feeling like they should be able to be different, or I remind myself to move from being their father, and I invite myself to think of them as my grandchildren. And just that one distinction completely changes the dynamic. Nothing's that important. I relax, they stop feeling judged, the whole thing changes. It's like these distinctions are transformational.
Yes, totally. I mean, fatherhood is that it is a, an initiatory journey in itself. And so I honor you for going full headlong into it. And I wish you many happy years ahead of fulfilling, because those young years are precious beyond compare. And you are imprinting your children with your love in ways that are incalculable. Through your hands, for example, for the way you hold them, and through your soothing voice. For the child to hear that male voice is really key. Just that soothing thing. It's like many children didn't have that. The father reading the stories because the father was out at work and or hunting or something. So when the child gets that, it's like it brings a certain kind of balance into the life. I mean, this is very traditional in a way, because it's not essential, because the woman can also supply that tone. And so there's, but it is a fundamental sound that, in the universe, the Father's voice. I mean, we talk about it. Jesus heard the voice of the Father. And I think we need to be careful about kind of discarding everything, from the what we call the patriarchy, because if we lose that voice, if we lose that kind of masculine, soothing, protective voice, then we lose, the most precious thing, perhaps, of the divine masculine. So, and I think it is this balance, of, because men have been, especially in the developed world and, the West, men have been learning to be more vulnerable. And this is a movement, since the, I guess, 70s and 80s, or maybe the 60s even, where we started to learn to be vulnerable again, and to go on these courses and workshops, and those who are bold and brave, to open ourselves and realize there's a whole world of the heart and vulnerability, and that isn't a weak thing, that there's great strength in holding a vulnerable state and space. And not, it's, for me, as a kind of teacher role, I constantly sort of am aware of, inhabiting those roles, two roles at the same time. One is I am a teacher, and the other is I'm a participant. I have to be kind of, I feel anyway, like I want to be available to people as a I might be a father figure to some, but I want to be a brother as well to others, and so I kind of find ways to connect with people from, just if I feel something's happening, I just share it in me. And so I am fallible, and I'm not this kind of on a podium guy who's perfect, by my own admission.
You're choosing not to help dissolve these deifying projections. As you're talking there, what came through for me is you're kind of describing patriarchy without hierarchy, and one of the core things that causes trouble is this dualistic idea of a vertical development, right? A vertical, like somewhere to get to, and therefore there's better and worse, and we crave the comfort and the company of those that we imagine are better, and we condemn and gossip about those that which we may judge as being less inferior. And it's like what you're talking about there is like masculinity without this idea of any superiority over anything or anyone else, which is very in contrast rather to the old model of what was oppressive about patriarchy. So it's
and yet we have to be careful there, I think, because you have the vertical, which is hierarchy, and this horizontal, which is heterarchy, where everything's balanced, so you've got like kind of capitalism here, and you've got communism here, and you see it in many, you see this whole pattern in so many things. And so synarchy is when those two are, you don't discard one, you don't discard hierarchy. You have to have it in balance with heterarchy. And so, because one's feminine, one's masculine, poles, right? So there are times where hierarchy is needed. There's times where like there's a wave that just like when everything's in chaos and everything's falling apart and you're like in a transition period and there's no leadership. And so there's a time where suddenly there's a wave where hierarchy can come in and then step in and go, okay, this needs to go here. This is going there. You go over there. Right? And that leader comes up or that steps in and then goes back down into the hierarchy when their job is done. And that's the key. Like, can you go back down after your job is done? Because up there, it's really nice and you get a lot of attention, recognition, money. Yeah. And all those, and so being able to go back down again is the key, I think, in the new divine masculine. You can be both.
I really like that. I got involved with this urban festival for a little while, and it was very proud to be hierarchy free. And I only went to 2 meetings, and it was like the People's Front for Judea in that film. It was just like, it was death by committee. There was a pre-flyer that they wanted to send out to promote the next festival coming up. And I think there was something, I stepped away from the group when there were 70 emails about the design of the pre-flyer from more than 30 individuals. And I was just like, this is not workable. So flat hierarchies, I agree. But I was a member of a networking group where the leadership team was made up of everybody, and it rotated every 6 months. And then everyone went back to, being in the back benches. And it's like, so I agree. I think, there's nothing more beautiful than clarified leadership, but can that leadership not consider itself rarefied, and will it return to the field unbegrudgingly when its time has come?
Like one of my kind of early, it's interesting when you think about the early male figures in your life. And, I had this godfather, he's still around actually. And he's a very, he was an army man, he'd been in the army, he was very upright. And I saw him occasionally, and he commanded incredible respect, just because how he dressed immaculately, and his aura was like, and he was very serious without being severe, and so you kind of, in his presence, you were a bit in awe. And he used to work in the family business alongside my father, which is a wine business, and he was famous because he had this radiance around him of presence of this leader, but he knew every single person's name in the business. There was over 150, and he knew every cellarman, every person in, the cleaner, everyone. He would go around, and he knew their names of their wives and their children, and he would talk to them and listen to them, and then he would go back to being, managing director of this company. And so he had both in balance really, really beautifully. And I always looked at him because I heard these stories, Chris, his name was Christopher. He said, he knows the names of everyone in the company and all their wives, and he's got it all in his head. Yeah. And the moment he kind of would stop, and talk to that person, their kind of day would change, because this leader had kind of, would say, well, so how's Marjorie or whatever, and then they felt like they'd been heard, they were part of something, they felt that loyalty, because there was an empathic, side to his nature. So those, it had a big impact on me. Just, I think his presence as a sort of background being in my unconscious gave me something to kind of work with. And now when I do these big retreats, I do these big online retreats with like some thousands of people. Yeah. And I'm the sort of one up there teaching and sharing the kind of, and everyone's like, wow, he's impressive. All right. But then we have these community calls where people meet online around the world, a very global audience. And I go into the community calls, and I'm just one of the participants. So someone ends up with me in their room of like 3 or 4 people. And I spend a lot of time doing that, just meeting people around the world. And I just share just like they do. I say, well, I'm having a problem with my child at the moment. And, because we're all sharing what we're sharing. And so I'm, if they had me on a pedestal, there's no question of it being there. And you get to know people like that. So I think that's another aspect of the divine masculine, is being able to be the leader, but then being able to step back and be the listener,
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people that caught the deification because, you know, they make more money that way. And, you know, and people are very ready to believe that that thing over there is special and different. You know, it is the dualistic idea that there's somewhere to get to and that there's some perfect state of being and someone else has mastered it. And we don't, you know, and it's, yeah. And I think that
Yeah, the
authority,
masculine.
the knowing, you know, the masculine idea that more money, more power. I was horrified to see, to discover that the motto, the slogan of Pfizer, as a kind of scientific, you know, scientism, it was like science will win. Like it's like with money and knowledge and more microscopes, we will beat nature, we will beat death. You know, it's like authority is control.
Yeah. And success, you know, that has been the measure. Material success has been the measure of the masculine world and the patriarchy for so long, and still is, in a way. Like, you know, there's a cult, I call it the cult of success, and you know, we're all trying to get to the top. You know, or not all of us, but many of us are still, you know, wishing to get there, and instead of realizing that there's another way to prosper. You know, I was saying to you earlier, like prosperity, there is a prosperity without success. And if you could, you know, like I think if I could bottle that, like I could be hugely successful, right? Ironically, because yeah. But and so it is about realizing there are other ways to prosper in the world, and that the you know, what you really want is not that might be for some people, but it's not for most of us, you know, because we wouldn't be fulfilled. And you know, I know so many men who have been hugely successful and realized how miserable they are and how complicated they'd made their lives, and they couldn't breathe, and they had no relationship to speak of, you know, and they just didn't have this thing that I was talking about, like this love, this fulfillment, this sense of, you know, even this sense of spiritual kind of connection to life that's actually very simple. But some of us have to go up there and realize it. But I would save people the trouble, you know, and say there are other ways to prosper, you know, and they're simpler, because prosperity is actually about simplicity. So if you can simplify in more way, you know, your mind, your heart, your emotions, your belongings, you know, you simplify, you become suddenly you realize you're a lot more prosperous than you thought. And that doesn't mean you're poor or anything, because it's not about that. But what the world really needs as well is more simplicity. It needs more kind of grassroots connection to our environment and the people. Because I always say to people, like, you know, if you talk to people, if you know, they've done a lot of kind of research into what people say when they're dying, the last words, you know, or at the deathbed, like, how's your life been? Those kind of questions. And there are two things that people say the most, you know, in terms of, I've had a good life. They say, you know, the thing I've loved most is that I've fulfilled my purpose. I feel I've fulfilled a sense of purpose, you know, and that's usually about service of some form. I've helped people. I've helped something. I built a good business. We were good. You know, that kind of thing. And or it might be that I just, you know, or it can be a mother saying, I served my family well. You know, I felt like I brought up some good children. And the other is about relationships. You know, if I could have more time, I would spend more time with the people I love, you know. And so if those are the things that really deeply fulfill our soul, why waste your time trying to climb up some ladder that won't give you those things? In fact, will do the opposite. Yeah. Anyway, so prosperity without success.
Yeah, no, it was that video I saw of yours was the difference, which I recommend. We can put the link below where we post this. Just I haven't checked that one, but the one I saw was just the difference between wealth and prosperity. You're saying, you know, triple your wealth, and you'll multiply your complexity and your struggle and suffering by 10. You know, it's just like, and actually, if you're thinking, what I was taught years ago is that if you ask someone just what they're doing and then why, and they'll give you an answer, and if you just keep saying why are you doing that? Why? Because then I'll have more money. Why? And then and if you keep going, where they actually all get to is, I'm seeking peace, and I think that's what will give me peace. But then when you look at the models people are using to achieve that peace, it's like, they're mutually exclusive. That doesn't work. This is exactly what you're saying. And it's like, if we know we're really, because prosperity is the spaciousness to experience peacefulness and to have the things that bring us joy. It's like, if we know that's actually the point, then we need to change our vehicle, right? Change the tools, change that perspective. And I just think that is also, you know, that those distinctions are where the toxicity of the masculine are that's the fulcrum of it, right?
It's not about not improving your life situation either. You know, of course, that's like always desirable. But it's really about not thinking that you know, having more money, for example, is going to be the thing that gives you peace. Because if you can't be peaceful right now with what you have, you know, in some way, because peacefulness isn't to do with external circumstances. I mean, it can be made easier, but it isn't. It's to do, you know, in my teaching, I call it the Art of Contemplation. I've written a little book about that, and we could, you know, that peacefulness is about creating pauses in your everyday life regularly, so that you have time to just breathe and do things that you love and create some space. And this is what, you know, so I talk about harvesting the pauses of your daily life. And if you can have a day with some beautiful pauses in it, where you're just at rest, you know, in some way, and you can be in motion and be at rest, but in that pause, you're not trying to achieve anything. You know, the achieving mind is let go of. Then at the end of that day, you're going to look back and go, that was a good day. Whereas if you go through a day with no pauses like that, where the achieving mind is always there, doing lists, trying to fulfill things, you get to the end of that day, you're just exhausted, and you just think, oh, bring tomorrow. You know, there's nothing really memorable about today. And so it's like you've got to harvest what's there in front of you. You know, that's the great secret of all the teachings, of all the wisdom of all the ages. All teachers have taught that. All genuine, authentic teachers have taught the same thing. You know, live in the present or live in the moment or whatever. But it's you can be very creative at how you harvest that peacefulness in your everyday life. Doesn't matter what your life is like. You can always find it. It's there in split seconds. It's there between breaths. It's there between thoughts. It's there, you know, it's there when you're having a cup of tea. It's there when you're giving yourself a bit longer than you need to go somewhere. And therefore you can saunter a little bit and you just go, oh, wow, look, I give myself some time today, 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, magic can happen.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, as you as a busy dad, you're going to have to be very creative to find those moments.
I haven't sauntered for a while. I'm going to put that on my to-do list.
Well, you put the baby on your chest.
Yes.
You saunter.
Yeah. I mean, they're a lot of fun. So we have our magical moments. And yet, you know, it is, you know, between chucking Wellingtons on them and getting them in the car and doing everything, and yeah, having those pauses, having that saunter. Well,
they're just shorter in that intent. So the pauses are shorter, and so you have to be a master of short pauses. You know, because you're not going to get like an hour. I mean, no. But you might get 3 minutes. And what are you going to do in those 3 minutes? Because those 3 minutes can be worth an hour if you use them wisely. And if you have lots of those 3 minutes or several, those become the little pockets of green in a parched oasis, you know, not that but in terms of energy,
Oh yeah,
like you're doing
the parched oasis. It's definitely a parched oasis. Well, listen, Richard, we could probably talk for hours, but listen, it has been a real treat to meet you in this way here and to have this conversation. And I am, when you said if I'm interested in getting Gene Keys, I'm obsessed with, I want to take a Gene Keys sabbatical. It is incredible. And anyone that hasn't checked it out, you can get a free profile. You just put in your date of birth, where you were born and so on, and you get a free profile and you can read through what that means. You've got loads of free resources, and it's the most extraordinary articulation of the human experience. So I just want to honor you for that again.
GeneKeys.com.
GeneKeys.com. And thank you for your time. Really, really hugely appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. I hope we did explore the divine masculine.
We did. I'm more interested in the practical things that make it easy for us to be what I would call good men. Practically good men. And I think you've given us you've given me a lot to think about, and so really grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Bye.
Bye.